Welcome to the Work Podcast, brought to you by Open Assembly. I'm John Windsor, and today I'm with Paul Hlivko. Paul is the Chief Experience Officer and Chief Technology Officer at Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. As the CXO, he leads the strategic direction and execution of experience strategy, user experience design, as well as the digital channels and research. As CTO, he leads the delivery of Wellmark's application portfolio, API platforms, enterprise data management, enterprise architecture, software product management, and strategy. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm great. How are you, John?
I'm good, thanks. Nice to have you on the show. I've really enjoyed our conversations, over the last year. It's been really fun to get to know you, and really, really love what you guys are doing. You're thinking. You've been in this market a long time and using open tools for a long time. So I'm really psyched to kind of jump in. But let's just start with you. What's your background? Tell us a little bit about it.
It's varied. So way back when, I started a couple of small businesses. First being in the internet boom. Anyone that could build websites for small businesses was successful at that time. There were so few of us doing it that I built a small little business very early on. I was actually still going to school, and parlayed that into, rather than exchanging my labor for revenue, I was interested in, I guess back then, I didn't think about it this way, but I was interested in reoccurring revenue. And so built a digital imaging company for residential and commercial real estate. So we were one of the first to offer kind of the immersive 360 by 360 virtual tours, mostly in the residential market for us and a little bit in commercial. We managed a network across the eastern half of the US. Had some couple of key partnerships too in the imaging technology. That was a great run. Getting a company to scale over 4 or 5 years was a challenge. Selling technology into a legacy business model, when the answer was, I sold a house yesterday, why do I need it? It taught me a lot, growing a small business, and go-to-market strategy. I think looking back on it, we should have accelerated faster. Grab more market share, somewhat of a fake it till you make it scaling strategy, which is all too common these days. But it was a great experience. After that, I pivoted into large corporate America-oriented positions, spent a lot of time in financial services, which I loved. Just the challenge of the scale difference was of interest to me. A variety of roles across the spectrum in technology, and more recently at the end of that stint, digital. Running our digital channels for one of the banks. And the last 5 years, though, has been in healthcare. So health insurance in particular. And I've loved it. Getting in early on the innovation disruption curve compared to fintech was exciting for me. The value prop and the mission of making healthcare better for our members and our organization and the industry at large. That is a very complex problem to solve that we're all working on. So that was a personal interest to me too. And I think technology, customer experience, open talent platforms, which I know we're going to talk about, are key factors that can help drive a different future. So it's been great. I've had a great run, and I think I have a lot left too. I don't have too.
Yeah, you're looking pretty young. Yeah, totally, man. You got a long ways to go for sure. No, it's super cool. I think, watching you take on this challenge of healthcare is really important, not just from a business perspective, from a personal perspective, right? That's, there's so much pain and so much friction in the marketplace around healthcare. It needs to be solved, and it's really stoked that you're doing it in such a thoughtful way and innovative way. And it's cool to see Wellmark's dedicated to that journey of being on the not only digital, but also open talent. Let's talk a little bit about Wellmark. Tell me kind of what you guys have been up to, and what, from your perspective, on the CXO and CTO side of things.
First and foremost, we're trying to make sure that our clients' needs and our member needs are met. Not unlike any other business. And that is both designing and ensuring we have a product portfolio that meets the needs of our members and our clients. And in our case, our clients are large employers that we do business with, making sure that we stitch a value-based network together. And the network is really a key aspect of our product, health insurance. And then obviously driving cost optimization, both in how care is delivered, but also in our organization and how we operate and serve our members and clients. So as not too surprising. I mean, technology often is driving both product innovation, experience innovation, leverage and cost plays. So, I mean, everything that we do, we're at the heart of driving change for our organization and making healthcare better for our members. If I click out a little bit on the map, our product really is virtual or digital, however you want to describe it. Insurance businesses, health insurance this is true too. We're not selling a widget. We don't have storefronts. We're not serving our clients and our members in person. So our business model is arguably very digital, no different than a lot of digital businesses today. So trying to drive that change into our business environment and for the benefit of our stakeholders, that's a big undertaking. So company's been around about 80 years, and really adopting new digital business model practices will make us be here for 80 more years for our members.
I love that. It's super cool. No, and it seems, I mean, at least my healthcare experience, you know, and I have Anthem, which is one of your sister companies, and I, you know, through the CU, the University of Colorado system, and I'm just shocked. I mean, everybody says, oh, healthcare is not that, you know, not getting there on the digital side of things, but man, it's like, oh, I needed to get my test results the other day, and there they were on my portal and on my phone, and it's like, it's definitely happening faster than I think we want to acknowledge in the healthcare space, and super cool to see you leading the charge. So what's the most interesting thing you're doing right now? What kind of work like is really intriguing you in your portfolio of things?
I mean, for me personally, our CX priorities, customer experience, is just a personal enjoyment right now, and there's a variety of reasons. I think this topic in our industry is challenging as compared to other B2C businesses, right? It's reasonably simplistic to think of CX when I'm directly selling a product to a consumer, and my drive is to either drive share of wallet or increase recurring revenue. The CX objectives are fairly clear. In our industry, it's less clear. I think the value prop is there. I mean, we can improve access to care. We can improve efficiency overall. We can improve the literacy of how people understand not just the insurance product, but how they access networks of care as part of our product offering in the health system. So there's a value and incentive model that's quite different when you have employers that are often our clients offering insurance to their employees, our members, and the products delivered through health systems or our providers. I mean, the value system is very complex as compared to any other business model that's just straight B2C, where CX is often raised the flag of who's winning, whether it's Apple, Netflix, Disney, you can name all the famous ones. I think our opportunities in our industry is abundant. I think CX can drive a lot of long-term value. I think it is where there's going to be most of the disruption. So I think that's just a passion of mine. We restructured a team around it about a year and a half ago, making sure that we brought all of Wellmark forward rather than each individual division or business unit. So I think rethinking of the value prop and how we execute on CX and then measuring its outcomes for our clients and our members it's got me excited. And I think we have a lot of opportunity and runway, which anyone that consumes our health insurance product in general or the health system in general knows that there's runway for CX. Yeah,
for sure. There's so much opportunity there for sure. So let's dig into the future of work and talk a little bit about what are you seeing out there in the context of the latest disruption? I mean, from my perspective, you know, just as some talking points, it seems like if in 10 years ago we were talking about the Great Recession, we're talking about the Great Restructuring now. Right. And I think this COVID crisis economically also really brought up a lot of fragility in the system, right? People socially, economically, a lot of other things. And it feels to me there's a real focus, not just personally, but also professionally on how do we overcome and build resiliency into the system. Any thoughts on kind of what you're seeing in the disruption and how because you guys have such a unique perspective with all the healthcare issues that have come with COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I could take that a variety of angles, and I'm passionate about a few of them. I mean, this is going to sound very tactical, but I'll start with it, and then I'll hit on some of the other thoughts too. I think the competitive landscape for talent in most metros is going to get increasingly tight. And I think one of the factors is if you think about the institutions or companies that employ a lot of labor in our country, they tended to recruit most of them in the cities they operate. I think now those artificial boundaries and barriers, not for every company, but for many more, are going to be gone or much less meaningful. So I think when we're after top talent in our profession, we're not going to be just looking at the companies down the street as who are trying to shape our brand and our technology image to get the best talent in our market. We're going to be competing against people across the country that we don't even know, because they're going to be offering opportunities for our team members or others in the market looking for a job that wouldn't have been offered before the pandemic. So that's sort of the tactical. I think that's what's going to happen immediately.
Yeah, I agree.
The bigger picture, which you hit on, I mean, the pandemic exposed all sorts of societal issues, whether it's something as simple as access to broadband infrastructure,
For sure.
Whether it's literacy around technology and consumer digital platforms, those that were less literate were able to keep up, not as much. Whether it was the primary caregiver in households. I think the research I've read recently is women are much more impacted as a result of education being at home with their careers. So I think that got exposed as a result of this. So I think if you add all those themes together, obviously low income households were impacted much more than high net worth households. So if you stitch it all together, I think your observation, you said this right, but keep me honest, is somehow the individual is going to have to be more empowered, both professionally and personally. So I think there will be, over a long period of time, this won't happen overnight, more independence, more freelance, more ownership of your own profession and destiny, so that you have more control and stability, and you're less likely to be disrupted in these events. I do see that happening over time, more so now than it would have probably pre-pandemic. But I mean, that's probably a decade in the making.
Right. It's one of those black swan events, right? The reality of it is that we all look at the event, but we don't look at the conditions that were changing beforehand that really made a difference. I know I was just on a call recently, or actually this morning, for somebody doing research, trying to do some ethnographies in the marketplace, and told me this amazing story. I mean, it's a story that we hear all the time, right? And you do too, but it's just so inspiring. So a woman an accountant who's making $40,000 a year in Oregon, lost her job because of the pandemic, got COVID, has 3 kids, single mom, didn't know what to do, decided to go out on open talent platforms and started doing accounting for small businesses. She's making $26,000 a month.
Oh, I bet.
6 months later. So she went from a couple grand a month, well, let's call it, $3,500 a month to $26,000 a month. And she's staying at home with her kids and, living the life she wants to live with, 10 times the income. And it's really, really amazing to watch.
Yeah. I mean, there's always no matter what the event, whether it's the financial crisis,
right.
Whether it's the pandemic, there's always the great stories of strength that people show, and her story was one of them, where they're unlocked out of necessity. Yeah. Like she probably wouldn't have quit her job and tried that, but
no, exactly, wouldn't have taken the risk.
It's rewarding. Yeah, it's rewarding that we have platforms that can facilitate that now. I mean, that really didn't exist 20 years ago. So I think that there's a lot to be said about the risk-taking and innovation of the platform companies to match that supply and demand, so someone like her could be successful.
For sure. No, I think it's really great. Well, let's jump in to talk about open talent. Where do you see it fitting into the ecosystem of talent for Wellmark?
For me, it's access to a diverse set of knowledge and skills. So we have a great set of team members we employ. We always will. We always are recruiting more, whether it's backfilling people that are moving on with their career, retiring, or just attracting new talent for our needs. So I think our team members, we're always trying to get them to operate at the top of their profession or their job. And then we augment with primarily two different methods. One, your traditional contracted labor, some here, some overseas, that most companies do at scale these days, especially if they have a lot of variation of skill set. I mean, our curve goes up and down throughout the year based on what we're working on, what projects are active, what changes we need to drive for our company and our members. And then open talent, or in our case, a bunch of crowdsourcing, is the other complement to our workforce. For me, there's two advantages there. I get much better supply and demand matching. So it is much less like employed labor or contracted labor, in that we can get extreme variations in work that ramps up fast or ramps down fast based on our needs. So that's one key difference for me. But I think the biggest one is I get diversity of ideas, thought, experiences, talent, skill. I mean, I get much better diversity in that pool because I'm accessing talent across the entire globe, right? So their world experiences and professional and personal experiences contribute to our work product. And when you get a number of diverse minds contributing to a work product, you get a better result typically. So the power of crowds getting to the right answer or a better answer is why that's so important for me. And in our business model, our people drive the work, and getting access to the best people, both who we employ and around the world, is key to that.
That's great. So, and I know you've been working in the open talent marketplace for a while, and pre-Wellmark as well, right? Did you do some work before?
Yeah, crowdsourcing in particular was introduced to me in financial services. We had an innovation portfolio. Crowdsourcing was one of them, and it was for the same reasons I just mentioned. We were experimenting with IoT. We were actually building a piggy bank for kids. There was a connected IoT device that would light up when their savings account had money going in. That didn't get to market. We got acquired, but it was fun. We were building on Ethereum blockchain.
Wow.
A value-based award system for employees just to experiment and understand how blockchain was. And this was 2013 or 14.
Wow.
So it was a while ago. And a few other things. I can't recall the others, but those were the noteworthy ones. I still have the piggy bank on my desk.
I love it. That's so great. Well, what did you think? I mean, I know you probably noticed that the LinkedIn's announcement of their marketplace.
Yeah.
And what do you think of that? I mean, what do you think of those guys and Microsoft jumping into the game?
Well, I mean, they have a good starting point.
For sure.
That seems obvious. They have brand equity, both LinkedIn and, I mean, Microsoft with Satya, they made a great pivot. So they've got great brand equity. I think they're still considered a leader in our profession. So I think they can cash in some of that equity to build a marketplace. I observing Top Coder and observing some of the other talent platforms over years, it's going to take a big investment. I mean, Microsoft's got the capital, but it's going to take a big investment on their part. And I think it will still have some of the same challenges that any open talent platform does. We've got to solve the workers' rights and worker access, workers' access to benefits. On the company side, the last mile is difficult. So how do we integrate work products, especially if it's a disconnected crowd? Like we do a lot of our work disconnected, then integrate it back in. If it's purely a subject matter expertise or knowledge oriented crowd, I think that's probably easier for them to execute on. Or C-suite, I think they can execute on that easier. So it's going to be interesting to see where they start. I think there are different domains that are easier for them to start. And I think that's going to be what's quite telling.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that, it's going to be really hard to dive way deep into, say, a biotech crowd and figure that out, or a technology, crowd like a top coder. But it does seem like the place they'll probably play first is kind of the BTG, GLG, those kinds of, hourly, mavens and other great platform
Yeah.
that's in the community. But and my sense is it's only going to increase the velocity of the adoption, because the senior folks will say, well, if LinkedIn's doing it, it must be, and Microsoft taking that risk, they must have figured some stuff out, and I'm going to start my journey on this open talent thing.
I think you're right. That's why one of the things I led with the brand. I think that will open doors, remove barriers. I think the typical compliance, legal, regulatory constraints that sometimes come with this model, which almost all of those can just be worked through.
Yeah.
I think this will make it, in theory, easier for adoption. And I also think it'll roll downhill. So I don't think those benefits are only going to accrue to Microsoft. I think those benefits will accrue to the community and all other platforms too.
Yeah, no, I think that you're totally right. I mean, one of the questions always that Balaji brings up from, Balaji from Bondilli from Deloitte, is that, he just wonders, like, why aren't there more $100 million platforms out there? I mean, this is such a massive space, and it's purely a risk and adoption thing. And once people get comfortable, I think it's going to be a big tipping point.
Yeah, it's risk and adoption. It is, I think the other factor in there is product market fit. That's always a consideration.
I agree.
You have to first get to the step of what problem are you solving, and you agree it's a big enough problem to solve. Like for me, I'm solving an access to talent at scale and a supply and demand matching problem, which from my understanding of every role I've had, a couple of large enterprises, that's a real problem and is worth solving.
Yep.
So if people don't start with that, then why are they going to bother?
No, I love that. So how do you see it playing out? I mean, obviously LinkedIn and Microsoft were one factor, but where do you see the future of open talent going?
There's two different sides. So I kind of debate this with myself sometimes. I've heard others too. So the short answer is I don't know. There's one trend, obviously, of larger and scale is better. Whether it was the large tech platforms as a simple example, right, moving more vertically into every other business segment, that could play out. So Microsoft could go on an acquisition spree to, say, stitch that together. Some of the other platforms could come together with either partnerships or mergers. So there's, over the last probably 10 years in particular, the markets have rewarded larger is better, reoccurring revenue subscription better, tech platform better. So all of those have been rewarded with market returns. So part of me says it's going to go that way. The other part of me, though, like consuming these platforms, I can see a situation where it gets more and more specialized too, where it becomes more and more boutique because you're trying to improve supply and demand matching. So from a use of the platform, I sort of see it going that way, and we're not at market saturation probably yet. So I think you're going to find more and more platforms being stood up around niche knowledge workers or niche skill sets. And especially as we get more and more people into later stages of their career, I think this is going to be more appetizing because it's going to be a bigger option for them.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, the other things that I'm noticing are, this kind of productization, right? That I like what Dean and Michael are doing at Verticent. The idea that they're actually selling, cloud computing consulting. It just so happens that, the way they get that done is they have a crowd of 5,000 people that are helping them do that. And so, that idea seems to be a lot easier to adopt if you're buying a solution versus buying specific talent, unless you're really sophisticated in the marketplace. So that seems like a really interesting one. And it feels like there's going to be, a need for kind of that middleware, right? I mean, I love what Balaji's doing at Deloitte, creating some middleware. I mean, obviously starting with Deloitte Pixel and then getting down the road on some other things that, and one of the things he's been talking about lately, it's kind of been your space, which I think is amazing, is the idea of helping companies solve the need for healthcare workers inside their companies. So the idea that there are all these platforms full of nurses and healthcare workers that need to be inside corporate America now in every office as we go back to work, sooner or later, but the idea of like, how does that manage? If every company needs to address it, company can't be an expert on, the hiring and the workflow for nurses, but there are all these amazing platforms out there that already do that. It's just, there's no connectivity. There's no middleware there. And I think people like Deloitte and Diane, Diane Finkhausen at Shoshin and other folks like that are going to help solve that.
Yeah, so Balaji got me started. So with Pixel, to give him some props and credits. The old bank, he's the one that introduced me, and yeah, I completely agree. The branding of Pixel, the concept, the middleware, the stitching together of multiple crowds. Made perfect sense when we did that with Balaji at my last employer. On your comment about platforms integrating healthcare workers and employers. What's fascinating about that from my seat is there are already clinics inside of large employers. Some of the largest employers have primary care clinics in their offices for their employees. So this is really just a scaling play like everything else technology does, right? So you start typically where there's the highest revenue, highest friction, most material opportunity at large scale. You often are starting there, and then tech, more or less, is what scales it down market. Mm-hmm. And you can do that even with platforms now and not lose a lot of the quality of who you're actually engaging with, because you get better matching.
Yeah, no, I think that's right on. So what do organizations need to do to adopt these alternative talent models? I mean, obviously you're on the cutting edge. You've been doing it for a long time, but so many folks I talk to are still super nervous, not sure what to do. They're really re-examining everything, obviously, because of the disruption of COVID. But where do you, what do you see?
So I think you first need to be crisp on your why. Mm-hmm. If your why is cost arbitrage, you're probably not going to be as successful. I think you'll achieve it. There's plenty of cost arbitrage plays. But I think getting crisp on why you're doing it, measuring the why, like I mentioned, for us, it was access to diverse skills and talent and matching the supply and demand. So I can easily measure whether that is successful or not based on resource and skill set and project needs we have. But I get crisp on the why. Once you're bought into why for your own unique company or situation, to me, there's a 3-step process. I use this at my last employer and at Wellmark. First, run crowdsourcing against your own people. It's a learning experience. So we designed a challenge of automating legacy applications, CI/CD pipelines, list of 100 apps. And gave it to all the developers. We designed an incentive model so they understood how incentive models worked in the crowd. Mm-hmm. We structured it in a way that would bootstrap it, so the sooner you finished, the more incentive would occur. And then we tried to create a network effect too by a multiplier on top of it, the more people that participated. So you didn't have Billy or Jane doing all the work. Right. So we did that with our own development teams, and it was wildly successful. We even created a visual board to kind of show progress. And that was more of just a learning experience of the concepts. And we got a lot of good work product. We got a bunch of legacy apps remediated so they can do automated deployments. That's step one. Step two is simple. Find something that you don't necessarily need the value and the outcome, but it would be useful for your company. And actually execute that project on a crowd. I did both mine on Topcoder. First one with Balaji through Deloitte Pixel. And that then translates to your team members how to do it on an actual crowd platform. And then the third step, this is probably the hardest. You got to do all the hard work and the engineering. So as I mentioned, there is very specific rules of the road and engagement models that work well. So you got to do the engineering outbound. How are you going to use the crowd? What's it going to be for? And then the harder part is you got to do the engineering back in. So when you're consuming that work product, it actually gets all the way in through your pipelines to production. You have a way to manage quality, et cetera. The thing that I didn't mention in any of this is legal, regulatory, compliance. Right. I personally don't see that as an issue. It's no different than companies have outsourced their data centers and labor for 30 years. Conceptually, it's the same. There's some nuances. But early on in your journey, get the parties at the table, both your internal stakeholders that run those functions, and then obviously the crowd partners you're going to do business with, and some show and tell, explain how it works, do some education, and then you're going to get through T's and C's. But you got to do that up front too. I think it's necessary, but I don't think it's the actual barrier to success.
Yeah, it's all about alignment, right? Getting everybody on the same page for sure. So what's on your open talent roadmap? What are you thinking? Are there new places that you can use it, and are you expanding that? And how's that going?
Twofold. One is scale. So I'm always trying to find the most durable domain of work that has long-term demand, because that's the way the engineering effort to make crowd work is useful, right? So we're probably looking at our data and integration and API platforms at large next, because for the next 10 years, a good portion of our work is going to be integrating stuff, provisioning APIs. I mean, that's the guts of any technology division in an enterprise when you're building software. So we're looking at ways that we can build essentially a platform and a fabric that allows our team members and crowd to work on it, because we don't share data right now with our crowd, which we're not going to. So that's something that we're working on, because I think that'll get us to the next stage of scale and access to talent. And then second, expanding our partnerships. We're discussing with two others. They aren't in the same domain as Top Coder, but it's really different skill sets that I'm after. One around CX. Now that it is a focus for me and a lot of opportunity for our organization and our members and clients. And then a second around more knowledge and leadership and expertise. Try to round out that domain of skills when we need it. So we're working on two other partnerships now to expand our portfolio.
That's very cool. Well, that's awesome. Hey, so if I was going to give you a crystal ball, what would the world look like in 5 years, or let's say 10 years? The world of work and open talent.
Well, if I look back 5 to 10 years, I mean, we've kind of come a long way, but not really.
Yeah.
To be frank, 5-10 years ago from right now is not a ton different from a talent and way work gets done aspect than it is right now. I do think, though, the next 5 to 10 years, the pace of change will increase. I mean, anytime you have an event like a pandemic, lemonade comes out of those lemons. So people will find ways to reinvent themselves and their business model. If I had to predict 5 to 10 years from now, I think we would have more materially solved the worker rights and the access to benefits for gig workers. I think somewhere in the 5 to 10 year range, there's already work underway. And some of the work you're leading is key to that too. And then I think there will be more adoption, I'm certain, of open talent marketplaces, because our talent pipelines and the competitiveness of our profession continues to get worse from my seat. So I think that's going to drive it. I don't know how much, though. I mean, the talent landscape has kind of been a slow change over time. So I suspect it'll be slightly faster, but not a ton.
No, those are good thoughts. Well, let's shift the conversation. Just things that I've been thinking about lately myself and I wanted to ask you, from an automation and AI perspective, how does that fit with this whole ecosystem of talent? Are you guys looking at, AI-driven solutions for your customers in the CX space? And
yeah, in CX in particular, so the benefit of CX for problem solving and measurement and optimization is who the specific person is. It doesn't matter as much. Right. So I can take a wide array of our data about how people experience us and leverage open talent models to understand, say, patterns and do pattern recognition around how they use our services, how they use our channels, where is there friction that's driving up cost, as an example, either cost to serve or access to the systems. So I think CX in particular is the space where a lot of the analytics and data science and engineering skill sets that are available at large in the crowd can work on actual problems where the specific personal data you don't need. Right. You really just need interaction and behaviors completely anonymized. and you can understand what's happening, where there are clusters of certain behaviors occurring. And then the solution is going to be all sorts of things. Oftentimes CX solutions are either policy changes or basic blocking and tackling around processes, business operations, possibly new solutions that we offer in channels, new ways for our customers to engage online. It depends on the problem. I think from my seat, optimizing product experience and interaction experience for our members' experience is what we're trying to accomplish. On occasion, we may delight someone, but really they're at a time of need when they're using our product. So the best we can do to optimize their experience using the product and their experience working with us and the system, the better off we're going to be on CX. And I think data scientist crowds in particular can help us measure and optimize it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, Paul, thanks a lot for being with us today. So much great stuff and super inspired with what you're doing. Keep doing all the good work and leading the way for the rest of us to figure all this stuff out.
Well, I appreciate the time, John, and the invite. And if I haven't, I don't think I've said it already, but your work, your leadership, Open Assembly, driving this community forward is of utmost importance for the industry at large. And it goes without saying probably, but thank you. It helps us all out, and I'm happy to just contribute.
That's awesome. I'm humbled to just be involved in this community, and it's amazing the community we've had a chance to build together, isn't it?
Yep.
So many talented people and so much great energy. And I think we're gonna, the goal of the CTW is to transform work for 1 billion people by 2025. And I think just with what we've started is gonna really start accelerating. So I really appreciate your involvement.
Yeah, likewise. That was one heck of a goal. I can't wait to help.
Thanks.